Well, good morning. We're going to begin our presentation. I'd like to welcome all of you to the ISO 9001-2015 Approaching Your Transition with Confidence webinar. My name is Joseph Krolakowski, and I'm the Technical Director of Perry Johnson Registrars. Couple of notes for all of you. All participants are on mute, but we absolutely want to address your questions, so please use the question portion of the dashboard, and we will address questions at the end of the presentation. Please also note that copies of today's presentation will be available for download shortly after we're finished. And also, if you're interested in reviewing this webinar, it is available for reviewing on our website under previously recorded webinars. Our topics for today, we're going to have a discussion on why the changes to the standard were so dramatic. We're going to discuss the transition process and how that's going to be handled. We have an extended discussion on the key changes to the standard. We're going to have a review on the impact of the new requirements on your audits. We have some FAQs that have been asked in the past that we'll share the responses to, some concluding remarks, and then your questions. Now, as to why the changes to the standard were so dramatic, well, the ISO recognizes that the needs of the industries that use ISO 9001 have evolved, and they're going to continue to evolve. And they want the ISO 9001 standard to keep up with the times, so to speak, and to continue to be a viable standard. They want to see ISO 9001 continue to grow in more sectors, more industries, particularly service sectors. There was a deliberate effort to simplify some of the language that's used in an effort to promote consistency, both in the auditing process and just in general in understanding the standard. And the most important of their goals was a desire to have the standard be cross-compatible with multiple additional standards. So we're going to explore the impact of something called Annex SL and how that has now set the tone for how the ISO is going to write standards. So for those companies out there that want multiple certifications, the idea is that this approach makes things a little more simple. I'd like to identify for you a new resource that was issued late last year, and that is the ISO 9002 standard. Its official name is ISO TS, that's Technical Specification 9002-2016. It is called Quality Management Systems, Guidelines for the Application of ISO 9001-2015. Now this is an interesting item. It is an officially sanctioned guidance document that provides clause-by-clause ideas on fulfilling the requirements. Now, its style and its content is very similar to the older 2000 version of ISO 9004. Some of you may remember that standard. We're going to be referencing key pieces of ISO 9002 throughout our presentation today. And the clock is absolutely ticking on ISO 9001-2008. ISO 9001-2008 will cease to be a viable standard on September 14th, 2018. So PJR and every other certification body had to determine what our transition strategy was going to be. Working backwards from the cutoff date, here are the policies that were developed shortly after ISO 9001-2015 was published. New certifications to ISO 9001-2008 ceased to be available on March 14th, 2017. That date represented the halfway point in the transition timeline, and it ensured that all new certifications would have at least a year of operation prior to an attempted transition. Now, we still offer surveillance audits, and those will continue to be available until May 14th, 2018. Now, that date was selected to ensure that any last-minute transitions will be processed with no lapse in certification. Now, both of those dates are internal PGR requirements only. We are considering exceptions on a case-by-case basis. Now, as to how the transition audit is going to be handled, we do have three approaches that an existing client can use, and they are as follows. You can seek to transition as part of a recertification audit. Now, obviously, that is the ideal approach. There is already it's already a longer audit in a recertification, and obviously you're getting a new certificate. However, if it works better that you transition during the surveillance audit, we can accommodate that as well. We can transition you as part of an annual surveillance audit. That will come with a small amount of additional audit time. That's going to vary from case to case. Or you can transition as part of 2 consecutive semi-annual surveillance audits. Now, in that scenario, the additional audit time is going to be split between the 2 audits. Now, if you happen to be on a semi-annual surveillance frequency, you can opt to do your transition in a single step, and that is actually preferred. In both cases, if you're transitioning on a surveillance, you'll get not a brand new certificate, but a revised certificate. So I'd like to show you how that would work. Okay. Let's say that you had an ISO 9001-2008 certificate issued in January 2016. You had a recertification audit, a stage 2 audit, and your cert number was issued as C2016-12345, issued January 15th, 2016, expiring September 14th, 2018. Now that date, of course, is due to the mandatory cutoff for ISO 9001-2008. After September 14th, 2018, that certificate is no longer valid. So now we fast forward and say that we complete a successful transition to ISO 9001-2015 in early 2018. This results in a revised certificate. So you'll note the cert number is the same, except that it now has a -R1 for revision 1 on the back end. The issue date is the same, January 15th, 2016, but the expiry date is now January 14th, 2019. The certificate now bears a full 3-year period. Now, in terms of the additional audit time that's going to be needed, if you choose to complete an audit, transition audit during a surveillance, we've prepared a special grid to help our team identify the additional audit time that's needed. The full measure of detail therein is considered confidential, but we will share with you the following details. Most of our clients of an average size will require an additional half day or 4 hours of audit time to complete their transition audit. There are some companies that will be able to transition with no added audit time at all. If you've got questions on your case specifically, I would ask that you reach out to your PGR scheduler or your sales representative. Again, this is added audit time if you choose to transition during a surveillance. We are not adding audit time to a recertification audit. So what are the key changes, and what impact are these changes going to have on the audit process? Well, the first and most important change to discuss is the impact of Annex SL. Any good discussion of ISO 9001-2015 needs to start here. ISO 9001-2015 is among the first of the ISO standards to use the standardized structure from Annex SL. And Annex SL is it's a portion of a larger standard that's written by the ISO called Directives Part 1. And that is a standard on how to write standards. And Annex SL, as the name would imply, is a portion of this standard. And it provides a 10-section blueprint for writing an ISO standard. And in some cases, it even provides mandatory content. So this 10-section skeleton, so to speak, is eventually going to be present in all of the ISO standards once they get through updating all of the ISO standards. And you can think of it as kind of a 5-piece act, so to speak. Sections 1 through 3 are the non-auditable portions, the scope, the definitions, and so forth. That's unchanged from past writings of the standard. The 4 through 7 are foundation requirements, and those sections get into things like competency and policy and processes and exemptions and so forth. The plan portion, if you will, of the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle. Section 8 can be thought of as day-to-day activities, and it follows a natural progression, much in the same way that Section 7 of ISO 9001-2008 is laid out. So we have things that might be equivocated with sales and design and purchasing and production and so forth. So the do portion of Plan, Do, Check, Act. Section 9 is all of the various evaluation methods. A lot of familiar things here: inspection, internal audit, management review, and so forth. Obviously, this is check. And then finally, Section 10, the improvement methods, corrective action, continual improvement, and so forth. And obviously, that is ACT. So we have a Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle existing within the framework of the standard itself. Now, the standard has obviously made use of the term risk, and I know this is a somewhat nerve-wracking item for a lot of people. So we wanted to take the time to discuss this in some detail. The term risk is used 16 times in the auditable portion of ISO 9001-2015. And identification and management of risk is viewed as a system-wide strategy. And this is very much, if you remember when ISO 9001-2000 was published, the new idea at that time was continual improvement. And it was explained that this is not something you work on every other Thursday. This is something that permeates all of your processes. And that's very much the idea with risk in terms of how this whole idea of risk, and really the more proper term is risk-based thinking, is used in the standard. Now, they do not require a formal risk management process. In fact, I'm going to be pointing out a little bit later in our presentation, there's a special section devoted to explaining that you don't have to have a formalized risk management process. That's in the annex. I'll be sure to point that out. Again, this is something that impacts all of the various areas of your quality management system. I'd also like to share with you a definition for key risks as presented in ISO 9002, where it states that key risks are going to include the failure of processes, products, and services to meet their requirements, or the organization not achieving customer satisfaction. So in terms of, what are some high-level risks, here is what some of the guidance has to say on that. So let's dig a little deeper and have a look at what the standard actually says in the primary section, which is section 6.1. It states, when planning for the quality management system, you shall consider the issue. That's both internal and external issues, and the requirements referred to in section 4.2. That is both the interested parties inside and outside of the organization and their requirements, and therefore determine the risks and opportunities that need to be addressed to give assurance that the quality management system can achieve its intended results. And then working from those terms, risks and opportunities, you'll note that there's a twofold idea here. One, let's prevent things that are bad. And two, let's take advantage of things that are good. So there we have enhance desirable effects, prevent, reduce undesired effects. And then, of course, the larger picture here is obviously that risk is going to be a contributor to the overall improvement of the quality management system. Now, working from there in 612, it says, okay, once you have determined what your risks are, what your opportunities are, you need to plan actions to address those risks, and then have a means for integrating and implementing those actions into your system and evaluating the effectiveness of said actions. One of the things that we've kind of tried to do here, and I'm going to jump ahead a slide, is let's talk a little bit about actions to address risks and opportunities. And again, we're gonna draw from ISO 9002. What do they mean by actions? Well, there's three kind of large categorical ideas here. Risk avoidance. If there's something that's going to cause an issue, well, don't do it anymore. Risk limitation. If you establish procedures, work instructions, new training methods, and so forth, help your personnel understand what's going on and reduce the risk. And in some cases, depending on the risk that you're looking at, what you might be dealing with is a sharing of the risk. And one of the examples that's given in ISO 9002 is if you have a raw material that's difficult to get a hold of, it's expensive, the transit is long, lead time is long, you might work with your customer to agree on an advance bulk purchase of that raw material so that you don't run the risk of having a late shipment to the customer. But again, that's a sharing of the risk. So risk avoidance, risk limitation, risk sharing. Now, the other thing that we've kind of concluded on the risk requirement is this is not a new idea. And really, it's important to understand that we can tie this back to ISO 9001-2008 in a number of key ways. And these are probably the four most obvious areas that you can point to. Section 5.6, management review. You're already assessing your overall quality system and therefore targeting improvement efforts. 722, a review of requirements related to the product. This is assessing what the customer is asking you for and determining, are we capable of doing this? And if not, taking steps to resolve those discrepancies. Section 622, training. You're already assessing your competency needs. You're already taking steps to ensure that your personnel are fully qualified, fully competent. And then lastly, and perhaps most obviously, preventive action. Now, it's true that the standard itself does not require a formal preventive action system anymore, but it cannot be denied that an effective preventive action program can be a positive contributor to the fulfillment of the risk-based thinking requirement, and analyzing what are the potential problems and taking actions to avoid those issues in the first place. So how is risk going to be audited? What we've done is we've instructed our auditors to simply ask the question, what have you done to approach the risk requirement within the standard? And we've instructed our auditors to be open-minded about what is presented by the auditee. We've explained that there's going to most likely be a number of approaches, a combination of approaches, including the things that we looked at on the previous slide from ISO 9001-2008. Most importantly, we expect our clients to understand this concept. We expect you to be prepared to explain what your approach has been to fulfilling it. Okay, moving on from risk, there are some other key changes that we need to point out. The terms procedures, records, and documents have all been eliminated, and replaced with the phrase documented information. Now, if we look to Annex A6 in ISO 9001, we'll find an important clarifier. You need to look for the phrases maintained documented information and retained documented information. Maintained documented information is generally understood as a replacement for past references to documents, procedures, quality manuals, and so forth. Now, there's only a handful of these. There are no required procedures, as we'll learn later, and there is no requirement for a quality manual. But one item that is required to be, as the standard calls it, maintained documented information is your scope and any non-applicable clauses, and that is established in section 4.3. Retained documented information, that phrase, is generally understood to be a replacement for past references to records. Now, obviously, there's more of those present within the standard. One good example would be section 933, which requires records of management review be retained. All references to product now read as products and services. This has long been the case already. If you read Clause 3 of ISO 9001-2008, you'll note that it states wherever the term product appears, it can also mean service. The standard, again, is trying to push the idea that ISO 9001 is intended to be used by multiple types of businesses, those with and those without a tangible product. Management responsibility, that phrase has become leadership, and the idea is that management leads by example, by involvement, rather than simply directing that activities be performed. And we're going to see how that manifests in a couple of slides here. Continual improvement has evolved. It's now a larger section called improvement. And the idea there was that continual improvement is one of many aspects of improvement that should be strived for in a quality system. You can also look to things like breakthroughs, reactive changes, reorganizations, and so forth, and make the argument that this is also a form of improvement. It's not just limited to continual improvement. Suppliers are now going to be referred to as external providers. Again, this is intended to try to help accommodate service organizations. It's also meant to be a collective term. When we refer to external providers, we're referring not just to outside suppliers, but also to associate companies, to those we outsource things to. In ISO 9002, it even mentions by naming specifically corporate headquarters as an example of an external provider. Now, as I mentioned a few slides back, ISO 9001-2015 has washed away the last of the required procedures. And it's also eliminated the mandatory requirement for a quality manual. Now, an organization could theoretically achieve certification without those documents. But your auditors will still be required to verify that your processes are consistent and effective, whatever those processes may be. If you can do that without a procedure, great. If you have other controls in place that will get the job done and show that your processes are under control, that's perfectly fine. It's important for you to remember also that anything you choose to have on your own, at will, so to speak, is admissible as audit criteria. So we can't demand that you have a procedure for anything, but if you choose to have a procedure, the content of that procedure is considered relevant audit criteria. So your procedure should be accurate anyhow, but just bear in mind that even though the standard doesn't require them anymore, if you choose to have them, they still have to be accurate. The phrase management representative has been eliminated from ISO 9001. And the implication there is not so much that the responsibility has been eliminated, but that the functions are now falling on top management itself. Certainly an organization can appoint a key person, a key contact, somebody that can coordinate the meetings and can coordinate the corrective action committee and whatever other high-level coordination is needed. But the idea is that top management needs to be hands-on and running the system, so to speak. For a lot of our clients, this has already been the case for many, many years. For others, for other companies, this is going to be perhaps a challenge to have to pull management into this process and say that it can no longer be put all on one person's shoulders. The phrase permissible exclusions has been removed. You are now able to claim any item from ISO 9001:2015 as a non-applicable, which means that the validity of those designations is going to be verified at every audit. Now, in practice, that's not terribly different from what we do already under ISO 9001:2008. The only key difference here is that now anything in the standard theoretically can be claimed for exemption. We've done some analysis. Really the only sections where exemptions are going to be probable are going to be from Section 8 and in a few places in Section 7. Anywhere else, if you're claiming an exemption, it's going to be very difficult to substantiate that it's warranted. Now, one of the more interesting and important changes to ISO 9001 is the introduction of the phrase interested parties. This is a mandatory phrase that comes from Annex SL itself, and you'll see it obviously in any ISO standard. Let's take a look at the definition. Interested party is defined as a person or organization that can be affected by, or perceive themselves to be affected by a decision or an activity. And they give a number of examples, some of the obvious ones: customers, owners, people within the organization, and suppliers. And they kind of throw the doors open to some possible other examples: bankers, unions, partners, competitors. Section 4.2 requires that you determine who your interested parties are, but it emphasizes relevant to the quality management system. Now, the idea is that as an organization, you need to ensure that you've considered all relevant input requirements. The term interested party is intended to get you to think outside of the box, so to speak, and really look at it from a broad perspective. In practice, we don't think that this is going to require a great deal of additional implementation activity. Ensuring that you're cognizant of all applicable requirements, frankly, is simply good business. Now, I'd like to share with you what I refer to as a year one lesson learned. When we gathered our auditors, we have an annual training symposium for our auditors. And when we gathered most recently, we decided that we wanted to share some points of clarity on auditing interested parties. And I'd like to share with you the guidance that was given to our auditors at that time. So we reminded our auditors, are you asking the right questions? Who are your interested parties? Which ones are relevant to your system, and what part of your system are they relevant to? This was intended to highlight that different interested parties would influence the system in different ways, and they wouldn't necessarily each have the same level of impact or impact the same areas. We also reminded our auditors that it is most likely inappropriate to conclude that the only interested party is the customer base. And again, we highlighted the definition. We also shared with our auditors the extended list of potential interested parties presented in ISO 9002. Again, we've got some of the ones we looked at earlier: customers, suppliers, and so forth. But we also have some other interesting potentials here. We have owners, we have owners of intellectual property, we have local community groups, we have non-governmental organizations, we have employees and others working on behalf of the organization, and so forth. So again, taking a very broad view of who an interested party might be. And 9002 was also referenced in terms of who what the organization should be doing to determine interested party requirements. They mentioned things like reviewing orders, reviewing statutory regulatory requirements, benchmarking, market surveillance, customer surveys, user surveys, and so forth. We told our auditors that if the auditee still says customers only, we need to know that they did some form of analysis to draw that conclusion. How did you arrive at that conclusion? Was it just out of the clear blue sky you decided this was the way of it with your interested parties, or was there some actual thought and analysis put into it? And we told our auditors that if you could not see evidence of that being the case, it's likely that the process by which the interested parties were selected was flawed and a nonconformance should be issued. Now, there are two likely areas in the standard where a nonconformance would be written. In section 4.2, if we have limited evidence or no evidence of a process for monitoring and reviewing information, that would represent a violation of ISO 9001. And also, if there is no evidence that interested party feedback is being discussed within management review, that would represent a violation under section 932. Let's shift gears now and discuss the impact of the new requirements on the audit process itself. So in section 4.1, we have this very high-level requirement for determining, monitoring, and reviewing external and internal issues. We have implemented a management interview, a leadership interview, that specifically addresses this particular clause. So that's going to be a very direct impact, and we will review that in just a few slides here. Pulling some guidance on internal and external issues from ISO 9002. There are some extensive lists that are provided, things that an organization should consider, and I'd like to share that with you here. When the standard talks about internal issues, think in terms of your overall performance, your resource needs, your competency needs, your overall operational performance, your equipment needs, and so forth. When you think external issues, think in terms of economic issues, social issues, market issues, things that perhaps you have no control over, but nevertheless are going to impact your business and impact your quality management system. Now in section 4.2, of course, we have the primary discussion of interested parties. Do you know who they are? Have you established a process to monitor and review information about what their requirements are? And again, we've added this leadership interview to the audit process specifically to facilitate our discussion with you on this topic. 4.3 talks about the scope statement, and it introduces the idea of, is the scope statement appropriate? Does it consider interested parties? Is it reflective of internal, external issues? Is it reflective of the products and services of the organization? We've actually tweaked our audit report just a bit to trigger our auditors to assess the adequacy of the scope statement. The impact of this on the actual audit itself should be fairly minimal. 4.3 also talks about exemptions, and we've already discussed how this is now the whole standard is at least on paper up for grabs as an exemption. Our audit methodology for this is completely unchanged. You'll still be expected to have documentation of your exemptions and justification therein. Moving on to Section 5, probably one of the more important new clauses in the standard in 511A. Has management demonstrated that it makes itself accountable for the effectiveness of the quality management system? This item led to dramatic changes in PJR's workbook, so I'd like to share with you what those changes were. We have had to expand the portion of the audit that deals directly with leadership. Our ISO 9001-2008 workbook had a single question within it that says, is the quality management system effective overall? We started from that point and we built on that. We said, okay, we're going to add several targeted questions, and we're going to instruct our auditors to address those questions to the management team under the heading Leadership Interview. The audit report also, in addition to the leadership interview, it directs our auditors to ensure that the leadership of the company is directly involved in the management of the quality system. And again, this was something else that we went over with our auditor team during our training symposium. So I'd like to, again, to share with you the guidance that was given at that time. We advised our auditors that in some cases we were getting audit reports that reflected a single individual included in the leadership interview. And we indicated, well, in some cases that's going to be conceivable if you have a small company, 3 to 5 people. The higher the employee count goes, the less likely that it's a single person acting as leadership for the quality management system. ISO 9002 was referenced during our training symposium. We reminded auditors that it states, although certain authorities and responsibilities can be delegated, the accountability remains with top management. So in other words, you can still have a management representative, even though the standard doesn't discuss that position by name anymore. What you cannot do is expect as a management team to have limited to no involvement in the quality management system. That's the point that's really kind of nailed home by both ISO 9001 and the wording that appears here in ISO 9002. Okay, moving on to 511B. Has management assured that its quality policy and objectives are compatible with the strategic direction of the company? And strategic direction is it's an interesting new phrase. It's one of the more interesting things about it is it's not a defined phrase. And we looked over ISO 9000, we looked through ISO 9001, and this idea is kind of put out there, but it's not officially defined. So we reached out to our partners in the industry, and we kind of worked up a consensus on what is this whole idea of strategic direction. And it is intended to be looked at as a long-term vision. Where do we want to be in the future? Where do we want to be not 6 months from now, but 2 years from now, 5 years from now? And the idea is that your quality system, and in particular the goals, the metrics that you've established for your quality system, should contribute in a positive way to the achievement of your larger mission. So we've instructed our auditors to ask about this in a couple of different places, in particular in the review of management review minutes, business plans if you happen to have them, operational memos if you happen to use them, and so forth. 511C stipulates that quality management system requirements have to be integrated into business processes. This is not to be taken that we are going to suddenly start auditing your accounting books and digging into your accounting records and so forth. All this means is that some of the higher level practices from ISO 9001, things like revision control on documents, competency records for personnel, filing practices for records and so forth, these things need to be flowed out to your business activities in the same manner that they are for your quality system areas. Now, 9002 provides another critical point in conjunction with this portion of Section 5.1 where it states, again as a clarifier, top management shall ensure that the organization's quality management system processes are integrated and managed within the overall business process and are not treated as add-on or conflicting activities. In other words, they want you to not think in terms of, okay, every other Thursday we're going to work on ISO. No, the idea is that ISO is what you do. It's reflective and integrated in your day-to-day activities and is not something that you work on supplementally. Moving on to Section 5.2, is the quality policy available to all relevant interested parties? This is a fairly simple idea. Is it generally available to both internal and external interested parties? You can post it on your website, you can hang it up in your front doorway. ISO 9002 even states that you can stipulate that it's available upon request if you've got concerns about confidentiality. Section 5.3 has top management taken on the responsibility for the system. We've already kind of chewed on this and emphasized the importance of management being involved and not just delegating management of the quality system. But again, if we need a key contact, a coordinator, so to speak, that's considered acceptable. 5.3 also has a very brief clause that says, does top management have a way to determine if processes are delivering intended outputs? The obvious tie-in here is back to KPIs, objectives. We already have a long history of analyzing these within ISO 9001 audits, and the analysis therein is completely unchanged. Moving on to Section 6, we have the primary requirement for risk. Is there a process in place to determine applicable risks and opportunities? Again, I'm going to point this out when we get to our discussion of the annex, that you do not have to have a formal risk management process. We've already kind of discussed how we've approached this within the context of the audit. Again, the auditors are going to ask a very open-ended question and enable you to respond with what you have done to address this requirement. 6.1.2, do we have a way to implement those actions and verify effectiveness therein? Again, open-ended discussion is going to be the order of the day when we are reviewing risk and risk actions within your quality system. Moving on to quality objectives, Section 6.2.1, are quality objectives relevant to the conformity of products, and do they enhance customer satisfaction? This is, I think, an interesting clause, and I actually had a question from a client just yesterday about this. And they were asking, well, is it okay for us to have an objective for employee retention? And I kind of thought about it for a second. I said, absolutely. That's an acceptable objective to have, but the idea is that you have to have at least some of your objectives meet this criteria. In other words, you cannot simply have objectives that pertain only to profitability and only to employee retention. You have to somehow get to conformity of products and customer satisfaction within your objectives. But beyond that, certainly anything can be considered an objective if it adds value to your quality system. Have quality objectives been analyzed to assign resources, to identify who's responsible, put together a timeline, and determine a method of evaluation? Our audit methodology for this is completely unchanged, and quite frankly, the wide majority of our clients already meet this criteria, have met it for many years. From there, we move on to section 7, and another one of the more impacting ideas, and that is organizational knowledge. We've actually got 2 slides for this, because there are 2 principal ideas at play with organizational knowledge. And the first is that recognize that organizational knowledge is knowledge gained through experience. We all have key employees. We all have people that we would really be in a world of hurt if that person was suddenly no longer coming in to work for us. So what the standard is saying to you is you need to have a way to minimize the damage when that person is no longer available. Whether that's training methods, whether that's having work instructions, whether that is production controls that are integrated, enhanced quality controls, what have you. Do not put yourself in a position that you're going to be brought to your knees just because somebody doesn't come in on a Friday. Additionally, you need to learn from past mistakes. You need to increase the organizational knowledge so that those mistakes are not made again. Obviously, corrective action, production planning, these things are going to be very much a contributor to this aspect of organizational knowledge. Now, as I mentioned, there's one additional key component to organizational knowledge, and that is are we ready for what's coming? And can we look at what we have now against changing needs and trends? And again, this has been, I think, a part of the standard for some time, this whole idea of being forward looking. It's a form of risk-based thinking, but now it's being formalized within the standard. ISO 9002 has got some good ideas on organizational knowledge. They talk about succession planning, benchmarking for future planning, awareness sessions, even general awareness sessions, even a company newsletter can be a form of sharing and retaining organizational knowledge. From organizational knowledge, we move into section 8.3, and we have a couple of additional items for companies that design their products. Design inputs now have to include standards and/or codes of practice that you've committed to implement. This is very, very similar to what we're already looking at under the heading statutory and regulatory requirements. Our audit methodology for this is going to be completely unchanged. We're still going to be interviewing engineers. We're still going to be reviewing completed projects. Additionally, do design inputs consider the potential consequences of failure due to the nature of the products or services? This one, I think, is going to be tempered a bit depending on what it is you're designing. If you're designing a single piece of a multiple piece assembly, there's only so much that you can analyze, right, in terms of potential consequences. ISO 9002 talks about safety, financial fallout, and so forth in this analysis. And again, the audit methodology is going to be completely unchanged. Section 8.4, we've got a couple of new ideas that pertain to external providers. Has the organization established a method to communicate intentions in control and monitoring of external provider performance to the external providers? In other words, do they know how you intend to monitor them? Now, we already have lots of methods in place for communicating with suppliers, purchase orders, websites, terms and conditions, and so forth. All of these can be brought to bear to fulfill this requirement. Also, have controls been established for external provider property where ownership does not transfer to the organization? Now, one of the better examples of this that I've come up with is, let's say that you need to acquire a powder coating station. And because of the cost involved in getting that going, you decide to lease the powder coating station from an external provider. They come, they set it up, they keep you stocked with all of your raw materials, but officially it belongs to them. That would be an example of an external provider property where the ownership does not transfer to the organization. So again, we would look to existing things that we have between organizations and their external providers, purchase orders, contracts, and so forth. Obviously, the expectation, the presumption is that this will have limited impact for the majority of our clients. In 8.5.5, we have some items that pertain to post-delivery activities. Post-delivery activities as a term is relatively new to the standard. For the most part, this is going to touch on things having to do with warranty, with disposal. This particular section is one that we're seeing a lot of exemptions being claimed. In most cases, those exemptions have been judged appropriate. 8.5.6 talks about responding to changes. I qualify changes as falling into one of two categories, either planned or unplanned. Planned changes for most organizations are thoroughly documented. Unplanned changes, I think, represents a little bit of a challenge, but for most companies, we're going to see this manifest in areas like corrective action, customer complaint resolution, and so forth. Again, you'll note that the standard says, do you have a process in place? Now, this clause continues on our next slide here. Do you have a method for retaining documented information? Again, that's records about changes, including who authorized the change and actions arising from the change. And again, bear in mind that this is both planned changes and unplanned changes. And again, for unplanned, we can kind of lean on corrective action, customer complaint resolution, and so forth. Finally, we have the following new discussion points required for management review. You're required to now discuss internal, external issues and changes, including the effect on your strategic direction. You're required to discuss external provider performance, and you are required to assess risk management actions. Our audit methodology for reviewing management review is unchanged. We simply have a few additional items to look for. Your methodology for carrying out management review, frankly, is probably also going to be unchanged. You can still take the management review in small bites. You can do it all at once. However you choose to approach the management review meeting activity. Okay, as promised, I want to take a few minutes and point out the content of Annex A. Now, Annex A is obviously it's in the back of ISO 9001. It's an 8-part annex, and it's really, really helpful. There are some really important things in here that are going to help you understand what are they going for with some of this new stuff that they've written in ISO 9001. Annex A1 is called Structure and Terminology. And this enforces a doctrine that you do not have to align your documentation to match ISO 9001:2015. And you don't even have to use the specific terms found in the standard. So for example, if you want to refer to them as suppliers, then please keep referring to them as suppliers. You don't necessarily have to start calling them external providers. If you choose to have a procedure that you call purchasing and you want to assign a number to it and you decide this is going to be procedure 3, well, fine. You don't have to call it procedure 8.4 just because that's the section of the standard where external provider requirements are found. Annex A2 is called products and services. Provides an explanation of what they were going for when they sandwiched products and services as a term throughout the standard. Annex A3, needs and expectations of interested parties. We've reviewed this in a previous slide, and again, the whole idea of understanding who are the external providers and how is this to be approached. A4 is called risk-based thinking, and this is the portion that officially states that a risk management process is not required, and that you can approach this concept more or less however you wish. Annex A5 is called applicability. There's some discussion in terms of why the phrase exclusions was removed and replaced with non-applicables, and the expectations in terms of ensuring that you have justified those exemptions. Documented information is found in A6. We reviewed this earlier, this whole idea of maintained and retained documented information. Organizational knowledge gets a mention in Annex A7. My comments on the previous slides were drawn in part from the content from A7. And then A8, control of externally provided products and services, a expansive explanation on that phrase and who it applies to. I'd like to transition now to some FAQs from past presentations. Perhaps some of the questions that you may have will be addressed here. Will our staff have to complete transition training? Yes. It will depend on the extent of the revisions that you're going to be making, but at a minimum, the expectation is that you will provide some form of transition training, awareness training to your staff. You will have assessed the new standards impact on your processes and personnel. It's entirely conceivable that the majority of your staff is going to feel no effect whatsoever from your transition to ISO 9001:2015, particularly in the production areas. Now, what about internal auditors? Do they have to complete transitional training? Well, internal auditing is viewed in the same light as any other required competency within a quality management system. And that is that it is a competency for your organization. And therefore, it's up to you to decide what it means to be competent and the extent of transition training that's needed to ensure that your auditors are competent. So if you have a team of internal auditors that's been doing your internal audits for several years, it's entirely conceivable that those auditors could self-study on ISO 9001:2015 and successfully transition. After all, it is still a process audit, and these are your processes. As has always been the case, the competency of your internal auditors will be judged by the overall effectiveness of your internal audit process. What is the recommended order of steps to be followed? Well, for that, we turn to the IAF and their informative document 9. ID 9 recommends a 7-part approach for fulfilling this requirement. 1, that you review the ISO 9001 standard itself, that you purchase the standard and as a management team go through it to identify the gaps that need to be addressed. Number 2, that you have a plan of implementation drawn up and assign responsibilities therein. Number 3, that any internal documents that need to be updated should be updated to reflect any changes to your processes. 4, that you conduct awareness and transition training for your staff. 5, a full system internal audit, followed by a management review with corrective actions implemented for any internal audit findings in step 6. And finally, coordination with your registrar for planning of transition arrangements. We feel this is an exciting time for quality system certification. ISO 9001:2015 is a beneficial update to a standard that has got a long track record of contribution to the world. We feel for the vast majority of our clients, this transition is going to proceed with minimal difference from past assessments, and that there are a host of benefits from the new standard. We are ready to ensure that your organization experiences a smooth transition to ISO 9001:2015. I'd like to invite you to visit our website at www.pjr.com. We have a wealth of resources on ISO 9001:2015 and a variety of other topics. Among them, we have a side-by-side comparison between ISO 9001:2008 and ISO 9001:2015. We also have an FAQ report highlighting key questions and answers. Also, if you'd like to be kept informed of the latest news automatically, I'd like to invite you to enter your email address in the bottom portion of the homepage on pjr.com and click subscribe. You'll be opted in for updates on new webinars and other points of information. I do thank you for your time. And I'm going to go ahead and unlock the question portion of the dashboard. Okay. Mary Patrick Grabowski asks, if we seek transition in October 2017, but we typically complete a management review in December, which would be December 2017, do we need to complete the management review prior to October? Mary, at minimum, the expectation would be that you at least have a supplemental management review meeting to cover the new discussion topics. Jamie Aragon asks, our 2008 is broken down into 2 manuals, quality and procedures. While I'm working on transitioning right now, would it be best to put the 10-clause standard quality management system or leave it the way it is? Well, Jamie, again, remember that first and foremost, whatever documentation you've put in place needs to work for you and you alone. You know, these are your manuals, they are your processes. So I would say, think in terms of what are the processes for my system? How do I control these processes? What are the things that I need to make sure that my processes are consistent and effective? And that's going to help inform the content of your manuals. In terms of, does it have to match the 10-clause structure? No, it does not. That's not mandatory. We're getting some questions. Yes, the presentation will be available for download shortly after we're finished, and it will be available for reviewing shortly after we're finished. Brianna Murphy asks, how is top management defined? Well, Brianna, that's going to be for you to determine who is the management team, who is the leadership team. It's not something that the standard has a kind of a pre-list of who makes the cut and who does not. That's for you to determine for yourself at the organizational level. Tim Lyons asks, where in the standard does it state that we need transition training for staff? Would these webinars be sufficient? Which webinar topics would be the most effective? Well, Tim, in terms of where is it mandatory from ISO 9001, I would state that you can look at the larger picture of competency, ensuring that your staff is cognizant of all applicable requirements, In terms of giving it some teeth at the audit level, again, remember that transition training is mandated by the IAF, and that's the International Accreditation Forum, and they are the ones that tell folks like PJR what to do. So it's being enforced kind of on the certification end, if you will. Okay. We have a question from Tango Chulam Gowender. I do hope I'm pronouncing that right. I apologize if I did not. Is management review still required to be once a year? Well, the timing of management review is not something that is specified in ISO 9001 itself. There is no minimum frequency. But we judge frequency in terms of the effectiveness of the meeting, and we look to see, is it a contributing part of your quality management system? If you can accomplish that with a once annual the once annual meeting, that would be acceptable. Okay, Derek Cross, you indicated, say again, the significance of the management review date. I'd like for you to ask if you could possibly rephrase your question. I'll give it a go. I'm afraid I'm not understanding your question at the moment. Okay, Steve Hollenneck asks, maybe I don't understand what they mean by formal requirements, but it seems that if we need to know all our risks, specific actions to address them, and evidence showing actions are reviewed for effectiveness, there must be a formal requirement. What am I missing? Well, Steve, remember that this is not something that it's not a standalone activity. It's not a risk management activity. You have to think in terms of what are my processes and how do I consider the potential risks for those processes. So if you have a purchasing process, what are the potential risks in purchasing? If you have an inspection process, what are the risks in the inspection area? Now, in terms of something tangible to kind of organize your risk actions and so forth, I'll point out, remember that you have to have discussion of risk action within your management review. So if you're looking for something to kind of nail it down, where do we capture this? Management review is a good starting point because it's required by the standard that it be discussed there. James Persaud, again, I do hope I'm pronouncing that right. What objective evidence is needed to be shown to the auditor of the training of employees about the revision to the standard? Well, James, I can't really tell you exactly how to approach it, but I will say that we've been very open-minded about the approach that's been taken. So if you have some evidence of how the transitional training was conducted, if you have some evidence of who participated, I can't imagine that it wouldn't be accepted in an audit situation. Ryan Hall, where is the 10-clause structure for the quality manual requirements found? Well, Ryan, again, remember there is no requirement for a quality manual. The 10-clause structure itself, of course, can be found within the ISO 9001 standard. Another follow-up question from Tim Lyons, would sharing these webinars be sufficient for training our staff? If so, which webinar topics? Well, Tim, I want to hold off on giving an official endorsement for the webinar as the only means of transition training, because remember, what you're expected to do is review the standard against your implemented system. It's not just, okay, what's new in ISO 9001, it's how does this impact our processes rather. How does this impact our quality management system? Certainly the webinars are going to help you introduce the new standard, but you also have to make sure that if your processes are changing as a result of the new standard, that is also being shared with the relevant employees. Okay, Billy Aliage, asks, if internal audits and management review are not performed annually within a year apart as planned, should a nonconformance be issued? Billy, I'm going to say that that's possible that that would be a nonconformance, but I would want to be right in there and from the audit perspective and looking at all the relevant information. Okay, follow up from Derek Cross. You mentioned needing to have a management review before October. What is the timing for transition in this year's audit? Well, in terms of the transition, it's going to be dependent on your current cycle. If you have a recertification audit coming up this year, our expectation is that you should be ready to transition this year. If it's a surveillance this year and you have a recertification next year or another surveillance next year, obviously you can push it out a bit. Again, in terms of the timing on your transition, that would be a question better directed to your scheduler, and we'll kind of look at your case individually. Another question from Tanchelam Gowender. Risk-based thinking, could it be major, minor, critical? At what level? Yes, you can set levels of risk. That's not an inappropriate action to take. Are there any further questions? Okay, well, thank you all for your time and attention. Have a great day.